In a bustling hospital in a city, a compassionate nurse was tending to an elderly patient who had no family. One day, she discovered an envelope hidden under the old man's pillow, and its contents left her astonished. Michael awoke early in the morning, as he always did. His sprawling, luxurious home was a testament to his success as a businessman in his younger years. However, the wide hallways and elegant wooden furniture felt emptier than ever. The walls, covered with old photographs and family portraits that seemed to have faded with time, only amplified his sense of loneliness. He wandered through the quiet rooms, stopping in front of a large family photograph. His eyes welled up with tears of nostalgia. The house was grand, but lifeless. Despite all this success, I'm all alone now, he thought to himself. I'd give up all this luxury just to be close to my family again. As he prepared his breakfast, Michael glanced at the clock. He pulled out a crumpled piece of paper from his bathrobe pocket. The phone number written on it was barely legible, but he had memorized it. He dialed the number once again, hoping someone would answer. "Please pick up," he whispered, his voice trembling with anxiety and desperation. "I just want to hear your voice, to know you're okay. I won't take up much of your time. Please." The phone kept ringing, but no one answered. He put down the receiver, feeling tears rolling down his weathered cheeks. "Why won't you answer?" he murmured, placing the phone on the table with a heavy sigh. "Have you forgotten about me? I just want to hear your voice, even if it's just a word. Will there ever come a time when I can hear your voice again and feel like I'm not alone?" Thinking that some fresh air might clear his mind, Michael decided to go to the local park. He put on his brown suit, donned a wide-brimmed hat, and grabbed his cane. Before leaving, he cast one last glance at the family photo on the shelf. "I feel so empty without you," he sighed deeply as he closed the door. "Sometimes I wonder if you remember me the way I remember you. You were my everything. Now, without you, everything seems meaningless." At the park, Michael found James sitting on their usual bench. James, a man in his 50s, had a friendly demeanor and a warm smile. Unlike Michael, James always seemed to have a light-hearted air about him, though he had his own troubles. "Good morning, Michael," James asked. "You seem particularly lost in thought today. Is something wrong?" "Oh, James," Michael confessed, watching children play in the park. "The house feels so empty. The loneliness weighs heavier on me with each passing day. I miss having my family close by." Sensing his friend's pain, James tried to comfort him. "Don't despair, my friend," James said with a smile. "We make many plans and dream many dreams in life. But in the end, no one knows what tomorrow will bring. Sometimes there's unexpected joy, and sometimes there are unforeseen challenges. But isn't that what life is all about? A mixture of uncertainty and surprises." Just then, James's children arrived at the park. The two youngsters, a boy and a girl, were brimming with joy and energy. They hugged their father affectionately, asking about his day and if he needed anything. Michael watched the scene with a mixture of envy and sadness. "It's wonderful to see such a close-knit family," Michael said, trying to hide the melancholy in his voice. "James, you're a lucky man." James turned to Michael, sensing his emotions. "Family is everything to me," he said. "Every moment I spend with them is a gift, and even in tough times, I know how fortunate I am to have these special people by my side. I understand how hard it is to be without family. I sympathize with your situation, but sometimes things can change." Michael sighed and nodded. "I wish that were true, James," he said. The day passed quickly, and Michael felt it was time to return to his quiet home. Before leaving, he looked at James and his children one more time. "Thank you for being my friend, James," Michael said, squeezing his friend's hand. You bring a little light into my dark days. James smiled and replied, You're a source of wisdom and great stories for me too, Michael. See you tomorrow. Back home, Michael sat in his living room chair and pulled out the crumpled paper again. He looked at the number and tried calling once more, but there was no answer. He hung up, feeling a lump in his throat. Tears began to flow as he allowed himself to cry, releasing the pain he had been holding in his chest. Maybe someday they'll answer, he thought, dampening the crumpled paper with his tears. I just have to keep trying, keep being patient. The next morning, Michael woke up with a sharp pain in his chest. His heart was beating irregularly, and he was having trouble breathing. He tried to get out of bed, but his legs were unsteady. What's happening? He thought, reaching for the phone on his nightstand. The pain intensified, and he felt cold sweat trickling down his forehead. I need help right now, he whispered to himself, overcome with a sense of desperation. Sandra, Michael's housekeeper, came into the room to clean as she did every morning. She saw her employer collapsed on the floor and rushed to his side. Michael, what happened? She cried out in a shaky voice. Hold on, I'm calling an ambulance. Sandra quickly called for an ambulance and tried to keep Michael conscious until help arrived. Please, Michael, stay with me, she murmured, picking up the old envelope that he cherished most. Help is on the way. The ambulance arrived quickly, and the paramedics began stabilizing Michael's condition. The patient is in critical condition. We need to transport him to the hospital immediately, one of the paramedics said as they loaded Michael onto a stretcher. At the hospital, Dr. William, the chief of staff, took charge of Michael's case. We have an elderly patient in serious condition, suffering from a heart attack. We need to act fast, he instructed his team. The tension in the air was palpable as they worked desperately. Every minute counted. As Dr. William monitored Michael's vital signs, he felt the gravity of the situation. If we can't stabilize him, we might need to perform emergency surgery. I'd like to avoid that if possible, but we need to be prepared, Dr. William muttered to his colleague. Given Michael's advanced age, Dr. William worried he might not be strong enough to withstand surgery. The next few hours would be crucial. Dr. William and his team worked tirelessly to stabilize Michael's condition. His blood pressure levels aren't stabilizing. His heart rate is still irregular, the doctor said in a tense voice. Dr. William adjusted the medication and equipment, trying to find the perfect balance. Come on, Michael, respond. Don't give up, he thought as he closely watched the monitor. After what seemed like an eternity, Michael's vital signs finally began to stabilize. We're seeing a response. But we're not out of the woods yet. It's a good sign, but we need to continue monitoring him closely and see how he responds over the next few hours, Dr. Williams said, relieved but cautious. The medical team exchanged hopeful glances, but they knew the battle wasn't over yet. Exhausted, Dr. Williams sat down for a moment to gather his thoughts. He still has life to live. He must have the strength to overcome this, he thought, feeling the weight of responsibility on his shoulders. Looking at the clock, he realized how quickly time had passed. Let's stay vigilant. We can't let our guard down, he told his team, and they all nodded in agreement. However, a few minutes later, Michael's condition worsened again. We have no choice but to operate. Medication alone isn't enough to stabilize him, the doctor told the nurses. I'm not sure if he can withstand the surgery. This is an extremely complex case, the doctor thought, hoping he could save his patient. Stephanie walked into the hospital with a spring in her step, as she did almost every day. She was known as a dedicated nurse who could handle any situation with remarkable skill. Her passion for saving lives drove her. That morning, the hospital was particularly busy, and she knew it would be a hectic day. There was a critical patient who needed emergency surgery. Without hesitation, she rushed to prepare, changing into her scrubs and disinfecting herself. The nurse's mind focused sharply as she entered the operating room. "I trust our team. We'll give this patient our all," she thought, steeling herself for the task ahead. Dr. William took charge, briefing the team on Michael's condition. "We're dealing with a severe heart attack and arterial blockage. Time is of the essence. We need to restore blood flow and stabilize his vitals ASAP. Be ready for anything," he said, his voice steady but urgent. Stephanie felt the weight of the moment. This man's life is in our hands. "We've got to be perfect," she reminded herself, double-checking the equipment. The atmosphere in the room was thick with tension. As they began, complications hit hard and fast. Michael's heart rhythm went haywire, his blood pressure plummeting. Dr. William kept his cool, but alarm bells were ringing. "He's crashing. Get the paddles ready. We need to shock him back into rhythm now," he called out, eyes glued to the monitor. Stephanie sprang into action, cool as a cucumber. "Paddles charged, doctor. We're not losing him, not on our watch," she said, her voice steady and determined. They shocked Michael, but he wasn't out of danger yet. Stephanie worked like a machine, adjusting meds and keeping a hawk's eye on every detail. "Come on, Michael, you've got to fight. We're all rooting for you," she thought, pushing another dose of medication. Dr. William noticed Stephanie's unwavering focus. "You're doing great, Stephanie. Stay the course," he encouraged. For a moment, Michael stabilized, but then took another nosedive. "It's happening again. Charge the paddles and up the AP. We're not throwing in the towel," Dr. William ordered, his voice tense. "Failure's not an option. We're bringing him back," Stephanie thought, her jaw set with determination. The complications kept coming, testing the team's limits. "The bleeding's getting worse. We need to stop it now," Dr. William said urgently. Stephanie's hands moved with precision, helping to stem the tide. "Every move counts. We can't slip up now," she thought, feeling the pressure build. The tension in the room was at fever pitch. Finally, after what felt like hours, they got Michael stable. "We're not home free, but we've stopped the bleeding," Dr. William said, letting out a deep breath. Stephanie looked at Michael, feeling both relieved and worried. "Rest up, Michael. We've done our part. Now it's up to you to pull through," she thought as they prepped him for the ICU. With Michael settled in intensive care, Dr. William and Stephanie took a moment to process what they'd just been through. "It was a tough surgery, but we did everything we could. Now it's up to his resilience and strength," Dr. William said, placing a hand on Stephanie's shoulder. "Yes, doctor. We've overcome the most challenging part. I'm hoping for his recovery," she replied with determination. They knew Michael's fight wasn't over, but he wasn't alone in this battle. Stephanie left the room, her mind still reeling from the intense surgery. As she walked down the hallway, she felt the weight of responsibility with each step. Being a nurse is more than just technical skills. It requires empathy, stamina, and an unwavering commitment to life, she thought to herself. As her shift was ending, Stephanie finally managed to take a short break. Sitting in the break room, she closed her eyes and let the fatigue wash over her. "It's been a long day, but we made it through. Tomorrow will be tough too, but I hope it'll be a bit easier," she thought, feeling the day's burden start to lift. She knew Michael was now in a coma, and that each team member would do their best to help him. A few days later, Stephanie noticed Michael was alone in the ICU. There were no visitors, and it seemed no one was concerned about his condition. Every time she passed by his room, Stephanie felt a tightness in her chest. Why isn't anyone coming to see him? It's like no one cares. It's hard to see him like this, she thought, looking at Michael's pale, sleeping face. His loneliness resonated deeply with her. Stephanie decided to visit him as often as possible, even during her busy days. He needs someone by his side, even if it's not family. I'll come here whenever I have time and keep him company, she thought as she entered the room again. During her first few visits, Stephanie simply sat by the bed, holding Michael's hand and talking about her day. We had a critical patient today, but we managed to save her life. These situations are always tough. No matter how many times I face them, it feels like the first time, she said, as if comforting herself. She believed that even if the patient couldn't hear her, he could sense her presence somehow. So don't give up, okay? Wake up soon and get better. I don't want to lose you, so stay strong and recover, she whispered, gently squeezing his hand. As days passed, visiting Michael became a routine for Stephanie. With each moment spent with him, she felt a stronger connection. Can you hear me? Research says you probably can, but I'm not sure. I'll keep talking anyway. It's nice for me to have someone to talk to, and I bet you're bored with all this hospital quiet. But come on, show me a sign that you're getting better. I'm worried, she said, waiting for any sign of response. But he remained motionless in his coma. I won't give up. I'll come back tomorrow as soon as I have time, she said with determination in her voice. It was a promise she made to herself, a way to give meaning to her daily struggles. In addition to talking, Stephanie started reading books to Michael. She borrowed books from the hospital library and read them aloud. She hoped the stories would provide some comfort and maybe even help with his recovery. Today I'm going to read a chapter from one of my favorite books. I hope you'll like it, she said as she opened the book and began to read. Her voice resonated in the room, bringing a touch of life to the sterile and quiet environment. You can get through this, Michael. I believe in you, she whispered as she finished reading for the day. Stephanie also brought small decorations to make Michael's room more comfortable. She put fresh flowers in a vase, hung some thank you cards from other patients on the wall, and brought a small radio to play soft music. I want this to feel a bit like home, even if it's temporary. I hope these little things bring you some comfort, she said, trying her best for him. Meanwhile, Stephanie's colleagues began to gossip about her frequent visits to Michael's room, and this caught the attention of the hospital director. Dr. William called her into his office with a stern expression. Stephanie, I've noticed you've been visiting Michael frequently. Your dedication is commendable, but you can't neglect your work. There are other patients who need your care. I need you to focus on your job, he said directly. Stephanie felt a lump in her throat but tried to remain calm. But doctor, he has no one else visiting him. This is the least I can do for him. Besides, I only go to Michael's room during my free time, and I'm not neglecting my other patients, she replied. Dr. William shook his head, unwilling to compromise. I understand what you're saying. However, the hospital has rules. We can't allow frequent visits from non-family members. You need to focus on your work. Please remove everything you've brought to the patient's room. We can't cross the line between patient and nurse, he ordered in a final tone. Stephanie left the office feeling defeated. She removed all the balloons and cards she had brought, leaving Michael's room completely bare while he remained unconscious. How can we leave someone so lonely? If he wakes up and no one is there, he'll be so sad. I have to do something more for him, she thought, tears welling up in her eyes. It was an ethical dilemma that was eating away at her. The next day, while Stephanie was tending to another patient, Michael slowly opened his eyes, adjusting to the soft light of the ICU. It was a strange sensation. He looked around and realized he was alone. He tried to move his body, but it didn't respond as he wanted. A hospital? I don't remember how I got here. Alone as usual. Even when I'm sick, no one comes to visit, he thought before trying to sit up. After pulling the needle from his arm, he observed the hallway through the window and noticed that all the other patients had visitors. But there was no one for him. Why am I alone? Not even a card. Nothing. It's as if I don't exist. Does nobody care? He thought, feeling an overwhelming sense of emptiness. It was a bitter awakening in the hospital room. As he observed the movement around him, faint fragments of memory surfaced in his mind. He remembered hearing a kind woman's voice during his coma. The voice had talked about her day, about hope and strength. Was it real or just a dream? It must have been a dream. No one came. There's no sign anyone visited. But what if it wasn't a dream, he pondered. That voice had felt so familiar, yet distant at the same time. Meanwhile, Stephanie was in the middle of her busy shift. The news of Michael's awakening filled her with deep joy. But she knew she couldn't rush to his side without reason. The rules are clear, and I've been warned by the director. But it's so frustrating that I can't go see Michael now that he's awake, she thought, feeling her frustration grow as she tended to other patients. Her mind was constantly on Michael. Does he remember me? Does he know I was there? She wondered while giving another patient an injection. Every time I pass his room in the hallway, I feel guilty. He's so lonely. I can't abandon someone so alone. Even if I can't enter the room, I can at least look from afar and try to sense any change. This is the only thing I can do for him now, Stephanie vowed to herself. Michael was desperately trying to remember what had happened while he was in a coma. He was grateful to be alive, but felt overwhelmed by loneliness. Whose voice was that? Was it a dream? Maybe someone was taking care of me, he thought, observing the faces of unfamiliar doctors and nurses coming in and out of the room. But he didn't recognize any of them. With each doctor's visit, Michael asked questions, trying to get some clue about the voice he'd heard. Was someone by my side while I was in a coma? He asked, his eyes full of hope. But the doctors always gave vague answers. There are many visitors here, Michael. Team members might have been here adjusting your medication. But that's not really a visit. I'm sorry, they said, not giving him the reassurance he sought. Meanwhile, Stephanie tried to focus on her work, but her worry for Michael was constant. Her heart raced with concern every time she heard an update about him. There might be a way to help him without breaking the rules. He has no family visiting. Is there an emergency contact number? She thought, trying to find a solution. But when she checked the records, there was no one to contact. Michael is so alone. How can everyone ignore this? She asked herself. Michael was now fully conscious and feeling his loneliness more acutely. Every time he looked into the hallway, he saw other beds surrounded by visitors. He saw families bringing flowers. He heard laughter and quiet conversations filling the space. Why isn't anyone coming to see me? Not even my friend James. Maybe he doesn't know I'm in the hospital. He's probably with his family, he thought, feeling his sadness deepen. I guess I'm not needed by anyone, he whispered quietly, tears rolling down his face. The absence of visitors was like a knife in his chest, cutting through his hope. Stephanie's frustration grew day by day. At the end of one day, Stephanie decided to talk to Dr. William again. Feeling tense, she knocked on the door. Doctor, I know we've discussed this before, but Michael is awake now and all alone. He needs someone by his side. He has no family. Having support from family or someone else could aid his recovery, she began, trying to keep her composure. Dr. William looked at her, clearly tired. Stephanie, rules are rules. We've already settled this, he answered firmly. But he needs someone. Please, let me help him. Stephanie pleaded, her voice filled with emotion. We can't make exceptions. We need to follow the rules, he stated clearly, ending the conversation. Stephanie felt defeated but wasn't ready to give up. I can't lose my job. If I go to Michael's room, Dr. William will surely fire me. My emotional actions have made it impossible for me to see him now, she thought. The next day, as Stephanie hurried down the hospital corridor, something caught her attention. Glancing into Michael's room, she saw him crying. He sat on the bed, his face in his hands, his shoulders shaking slightly. The sight made her pause for a moment. I can't leave him like this, she thought, quietly entering the room despite the rules against visiting, and slowly approaching him. Feeling an urgent need to comfort him, she softly called out, Michael. Michael looked up in surprise, tears still streaming down his wrinkled face. It's you. I heard your voice when I was unconscious. Everyone said I was dreaming or hallucinating. Was it really you who came here? He asked, his voice weak and trembling. Stephanie sat beside him, carefully taking his hand. Yes, it was me. I was part of your surgery team and visited you a few times while you were in a coma. I couldn't bear to leave you alone. I'm sorry, I haven't been able to visit lately. The director forbade me from coming here because it was interfering with the hospital's operations and other patients need care too, she began to explain, but Michael interrupted her. I thought I was dreaming. I thought no one cared about me, he confessed, his voice filled with evident sadness. Stephanie squeezed his hand, trying to offer as much comfort as she could. I was here as much as I could be. I felt you needed someone, she said gently. Michael looked at her, his eyes a mixture of gratitude and pain. Thank you, he whispered, trying to hold back his tears. Michael, I'm sorry I couldn't be here all the time. But please don't cry, you're not alone. Remember, I'm rooting for your recovery, she added, trying to calm him. Stephanie's presence brought Michael unexpected solace. He took a deep breath and began to talk about his life, painful memories, and accumulated frustrations. My wife passed away years ago. I don't know where my daughter is. We had a fight years ago, and since then, I haven't been able to talk to her or see her. She's forgotten about me, he said, his voice shaking. It's not fair to be alone all the time. There was no contact information for your daughter in your records, but if you want, we could try calling her, Stephanie responded. I've tried contacting her many times, but no one answers. The number is probably not in use anymore. I miss her every day. I miss having a family, Michael said, tears welling up in his eyes. Stephanie felt Michael's pain as if it were her own. You're not alone anymore. Think of me as a friend. Stay strong and get better soon. I'm sure you'll see your daughter again someday, she said, trying to give him hope. He looked at her, trying to believe. How can I believe that? My life is already full of loss, he said in a despairing tone. Because you're strong. And I'm here to help you, Stephanie replied firmly, squeezing his hand tighter. Stephanie's comfort seemed to ease Michael's pain a little. He took a deep breath and began to talk about happy moments with his family. There were days when the house was filled with laughter. My daughter would run around in the yard, my wife would be cooking, and everything seemed perfect. But after my wife passed, only my daughter was left. When she grew up, she stopped talking to me, he said with a sad smile. Stephanie smiled too, imagining those scenes. Those are wonderful memories, Michael, she said, trying to cheer him up. Now those memories are all I have, he replied with a deep sigh. Every word exchanged seemed to be building a bridge over the depths of Michael's loneliness. I should have done more for my daughter. I wanted to be a better father. If only I had listened to her more, he confessed in a voice full of regret. I'm sure you did the best you could. That's what matters most, Stephanie said, trying to ease his guilt. Everyone makes mistakes, Michael. The important thing is to learn and move forward, she added carefully. Their conversation was interrupted by a nurse coming in to check Michael's vital signs. I have to go now. But I'll come back to see you. You're not alone anymore, she said, squeezing his hand one last time before leaving. Michael looked at her with grateful eyes. Thank you, Stephanie. You've brought light into this dark place, he said, his voice filled with emotion. I'm glad I could comfort Michael, but he still needs a lot of support, she thought, reflecting on the stories he had shared, feeling conflicted. There must be more I can do for him. I wonder if I can track down his daughter. Maybe I can offer more support once he's discharged from the hospital, she resolved as she prepared to face the rest of her day's work. She returned to her duties. An elderly patient, Judith, who needed special care, was recovering from a difficult surgery. How are you feeling today, Judith? Stephanie asked as she adjusted the pillow to make the patient more comfortable. A bit better, dear. You're an angel, Judith answered with a weak smile. Stephanie smiled back, feeling the satisfaction that comes from helping others. We'll have you recovered as quickly as possible, she said as she changed the IV drip. After confirming that the patient was doing well and all vital signs were stable, Stephanie let out a small sigh. You'll be all right. Call if you need anything, she said as she left the room and headed towards her next patient. Her thoughts immediately returned to Michael. The conversation they had shared was still fresh in her mind, and she felt an urgent desire to help him find peace. When Stephanie arrived at Michael's room, she found the bed empty. Where did he go? She worried. She looked around the room for clues and checked the patient records, discovering he'd been taken for tests to check his condition. Stephanie decided to adjust the pillow and noticed something underneath. Curiosity got the better of her, and she lifted the pillow to find a yellowed, worn envelope. What's this? Why is it here? Did someone leave a gift for Michael? She wondered. Carefully opening the envelope, she was surprised to find an old photograph inside. The photo showed a young woman who looked familiar. That's my mother, she thought, feeling a chill run down her spine. Examining the photo closely, her heart began to race. Why does Michael have a picture of my mother? She wondered. She returned the photo to the envelope and put it back, determined to ask Michael about it when he returned. Stephanie continued tidying the room, but her mind was preoccupied with the photo. She sat down for a moment, trying to calm her thoughts. I'll wait for him to come back. Maybe he can explain. I hope the director doesn't find out I'm here, but I need to know why this photo is here, she resolved. After a while, Michael returned to the room, accompanied by a nurse. He looked more energetic, which brought Stephanie some relief. Good morning, Michael. How was your walk? She asked, trying to hide her unease. It was nice. Tiring, but nice, he answered with a smile. Stephanie couldn't completely hide her anxiety. I need to ask him about the photo, she thought as she straightened the sheets. Once Michael was settled in bed, Stephanie decided to address the issue. Michael, I found this while tidying your room, she said, holding up the envelope. He looked at her with a puzzled expression. What did you find? He asked, raising an eyebrow. Stephanie took the photo out of the envelope and showed it to him. This photograph. Who is this woman? She asked, trying to keep her voice steady. Michael took the photo, and his expression changed as he looked at it. Ah, that's... he murmured, clearly surprised. Stephanie observed his every move, looking for clues. This woman, she's my mother, Stephanie said, trying to hide her tension. Michael stared at the photo for a long time, tears welling up in his eyes. He began to tremble, clutching the photo more tightly. Stephanie saw that Michael was deeply moved. "I don't understand why you have a photo of my mother. Can you explain?" she asked, trying to comprehend the depth of their connection. Michael couldn't answer immediately, his voice shaking as tears began to stream down his face. He started to cry, unable to hide his pain. "How did you know my mother?" Stephanie pressed, her own voice trembling. Before Michael could answer, another nurse called Stephanie over the intercom. "Stephanie, the patient in room 12 has taken a turn for the worse. She's in shock," the urgent voice announced. Stephanie looked at Michael, torn between her desire to know more and her duty. "I have to go, Michael. Get some rest. We'll talk later," she said hurriedly, leaving the room to rush to the patient. When she arrived, she saw the pale, unconscious patient surrounded by nurses. "Stay calm, we need to stabilize her," Stephanie shouted, taking control of the situation. As she administered medication and adjusted equipment, Stephanie tried to maintain her composure. "You'll be all right, Judith. We're going to help you," she whispered, focusing on saving the patient. While working desperately to save Judith, Stephanie's mind was still on Michael and her mother's photo. "I need to get back and hear the rest of the story. But right now, I have to save Judith," she thought, concentrating all her energy on the emergency at hand. Judith's condition stabilized, but Stephanie was exhausted from handling the crisis. As she walked down the hospital corridor, her thoughts immediately returned to Michael. "I need to know more about Mom and his relationship with her," she thought, determined to continue the conversation that had been so abruptly interrupted. When she entered Michael's room, he was sitting there, staring at the photo. "Michael, can we continue our conversation?" she asked, feeling a mix of anxiety and urgency. He slowly looked up, his face filled with sadness and emotion. "Stephanie, we have a lot to talk about," he replied in a tone that reflected the depth of what was to come. Stephanie sat down next to him, ready to listen to every word. Michael held the photo carefully, treating it like a fragile treasure. "The woman in this photo, Stephanie, she's your mother, and she's my daughter," he said, shocking Stephanie. Tears immediately began to roll down her cheeks, but Michael continued. "When she was a child, we were very close. But when she grew up, I did something I deeply regret. I regret it every day. She was coming of age and started dating a man who wasn't good for her. He was rough, and it seemed like he didn't treat her well. I tried everything to keep her away from him, but that only pushed her further away from me," he revealed, tears flowing. "We had a terrible fight. I said harsh things. In the end, she decided to cut ties with me. I just wanted to protect her. I didn't want that man to hurt my daughter. But I guess she didn't want me involved," he continued. Stephanie listened silently, feeling the weight of every word. "I called her every day, but it never worked out. I searched for her everywhere I could think of, but I couldn't find her. Every time it all ended in vain, my heart broke a little more," he confessed, his voice shaking with emotion. "The pain of losing my daughter and knowing she was suffering, but not being able to help her, was unbearable. I've lived with that guilt and constant pain for years," he continued. "She was everything to me, but I lost her because of my fear and overprotectiveness," he concluded. Stephanie felt her own heart breaking as she listened. "Michael. Grandpa," she said, trying to come to terms with this revelation. "Mom didn't talk about you much. She passed away a few years ago. I didn't know what had happened between you two. She only talked a little about her childhood. Mom told me that my father was a cruel man. He abused her and caused her a lot of pain. That's why she left town. To protect herself and me, she said, feeling tears well up. When Mom died, she left me the house. That's why I came back to her hometown. As a way to connect with her. And since then, I've been carrying this loneliness all by myself, she continued. Michael looked at her, surprised and devastated. Stephanie. I didn't know. My daughter, that she had passed away, he said, his voice shaking as he cried painfully. I had no idea she suffered so much, and that you had to go through such hardship too. It breaks my heart. My daughter could have asked me for help. But she was always so independent. If I had known, I would have done anything to protect her and you, he confessed, squeezing Stephanie's hand. The man she loved was truly terrible. The thought of my daughter suffered because of him tears me apart. There isn't a day that goes by that I don't miss her, he continued. Stephanie squeezed his hand back, feeling a deep connection. Now I understand why Mom didn't talk about you. She probably didn't want to trouble you. But by doing that, we cut off an important connection, she said, her voice filled with emotion. I think Mom loved you. She never said it out loud, but she always spoke fondly of her father, she continued. You were always part of our story. Even if it was in a painful way, she concluded. Michael was now crying openly, tears streaming down his wrinkled face. Stephanie, my granddaughter. I never thought I'd see the day I'd meet you. What a blessing, he said, his voice filled with hope. I want to make up for lost time. I know we can't erase the past, but please give me that chance. I want to be the grandfather you deserve, he pleaded. Stephanie felt her heart opening up. Of course, Grandpa. I want you to be part of my life. I want to know more about our family history. Let's create new memories together. We can't forget the pain of the past, but we can turn it into something beautiful, something that makes us stronger, she said with renewed determination. I think Mom would be happy. Let's honor her memory and build something new from the ashes of the past, she declared. The hospital room was filled with emotion. Stephanie and Michael's words were creating an unbreakable bond. Stephanie, I promise to do everything I can to be the grandfather you deserve. We won't let the past tear us apart again. Let's move forward together, Michael said, holding her hand tightly and affectionately. Yes, let's move forward together, Grandpa, Stephanie replied with a tearful smile. The next day, Stephanie woke up feeling happy. The weight of yesterday's revelation was still with her, but now there was tangible hope. I have a grandfather. I have family. And he has family too. We are each other's family now, she thought as she prepared for work. She was excited to see Michael again and continue building the new connection they had discovered. When Stephanie arrived at the hospital, she was called to the director's office. Sitting in front of Dr. William, she felt anxious. Stephanie, we need to talk about Michael, he said in a stern tone. Stephanie felt her heart racing. Yes, doctor. What is it? She asked, trying to hide her uneasiness. I've received reports that you've been staying in a patient's room after visiting ours again. As professionals, we need to maintain focus and follow the rules, Dr. Williams said, looking her straight in the eye. We need to make sure you're available to respond quickly when other patients need you, he continued. Stephanie took a deep breath, knowing it was time to reveal the truth. Doctor, I understand the rules. But there's something you need to know, she began in a firm voice. Michael is my grandfather. We just found out recently. It's a long and complicated story, but I'm his only family, she revealed, feeling overcome with emotion. Dr. William was silent for a moment, clearly surprised by this confession. Your grandfather? I had no idea, he said in a softer tone. Yes, doctor. He's my grandfather, and this is crucial for his recovery. He needs me, and I need him, Stephanie said, her eyes full of sincerity and determination. Please let me be with him. I promise to stay dedicated to my work as always. But please, let me spend some time with him. Michael has no one else, she pleaded. The director thought for a few seconds, clearly moved by the situation. Stephanie, I understand how important this is for both of you. I'll make an exception. As long as it doesn't interfere with your duties, you can spend more time with him. If he needs you, and you need him, Dr. William said with an understanding smile. Stephanie felt a wave of relief and gratitude. Thank you, Doctor. I promise to stay focused on my work. I'm so grateful to be able to be there for my grandfather, she said, deeply moved. You can go now, Stephanie. Take good care of him, Dr. William replied, squeezing her hand. With permission granted, Stephanie immediately headed to Michael's room. She found him sitting on the bed, gazing out the window. Good morning, Grandpa, she said with a warm smile. Michael turned to her, his face lighting up with surprise and joy. Good morning, my dear. How are you? He asked, reaching out his hand. I'm good. And I have some good news. The director has given me permission to spend more time with you. We can continue our conversation from yesterday, she replied, feeling a wave of happiness. Michael smiled, his eyes sparkling. That's wonderful news, Stephanie. I'm so happy we have this opportunity. I want to know more about you, and I want you to know more about me. Let's cherish every moment, he said, holding her hand tightly. Stephanie sat next to him, feeling a sense of fulfillment. Yes. We have plenty of time now. Let's share so many things together, she replied with determination. After that, Stephanie cared for Michael with even more affection. Day by day, he grew stronger both physically and mentally. You're doing great, Grandpa. You'll be discharged soon, she said while adjusting his pillow. Michael smiled gratefully. It's all thanks to you. Having you here changes everything. I can't wait to start my new life, he answered, full of hope. On the day of Michael's discharge, Stephanie was by his side, helping him prepare to leave the hospital. Ready to go home, Grandpa? She asked with a smile. Michael nodded, feeling more alive than he had in years. Yes, indeed. Let's go home, Stephanie, he said, taking her hand as he stood up. They walked down the hallway together, feeling a new sense of freedom and hope. When they arrived at Michael's house, Stephanie was impressed by the grand mansion before her. Wow, Grandpa. This is quite a house, she said in awe. Michael smiled, touched. It is. This place is full of memories. Your mother grew up here. Everything in this house reminds me of her. And now, I want you to be part of these memories too, he said, holding her hand. Stephanie, why don't you move in here? I'd love to spend time together and create new memories. This house is too big for me alone, and I'd be so happy to have you here with me, he continued. Stephanie was moved by the offer, feeling a wave of happiness. I'd love to. I want to live here with you, Grandpa, and make new memories. I feel like this place will connect me even more with Mom, she answered, her eyes shining. Michael hugged her tightly, feeling happier than he had in years. Thank you, my dear. Let's turn this house into a home filled with love and happiness, he said, his voice trembling with emotion. The days that followed were filled with love, as Stephanie and Michael talked for hours, shared stories, and laughed together. You're an amazing person, Stephanie. Your mother would be so proud of you, Michael said, deeply moved. Stephanie felt her heart warm. I'm so grateful to have found you too, Grandpa. We'll be together from now on, she answered, hugging him. As time passed, Stephanie and Michael's relationship grew stronger every day. He fully recovered and found a new purpose in life by his granddaughter's side. "Life has given us a second chance, hasn't it?" he said as they walked in the park. "Yes, Grandpa. We're on this journey together. And I'm sure Mom is happy too," she answered, feeling fulfilled. And so, Michael and Stephanie not only healed the wounds of the past but also found a bright future filled with love, understanding, and strong bonds. Together, they rebuilt the family they had once lost, transforming pain into a new life of happiness and connection. "We're finally back where we belong," Stephanie thought, looking at her grandfather and feeling more loved than ever before. If you enjoyed this story, please give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel. Your support motivates us to bring you heartwarming stories almost every day. Don't miss our next amazing tale, coming soon to your screen. We're truly grateful you're here with us right now. Click the link appearing on your screen now. We've handpicked some valuable stories and guaranteed enjoyment just for you. See you there.